It all came crashing down the moment I got back from my trip. One look at the doorman's face, and I knew my world had just been turned upside down. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Stepping out of the taxi after a long flight home from a business trip, the familiar sight of my building's entrance should have been a comfort. Instead, our doorman, Miguel, stopped me just as I reached for the door. He'd been a fixture here for the past 15 years, a man whose quiet professionalism I'd always appreciated. But today, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He held out a single folded piece of paper. It was a note from my grandson, Leo. The words felt like ice water in my veins. "You are no longer part of the family. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." My hand began to shake as I reread the cruel, nonsensical sentences. I looked up at Miguel, my mind reeling, desperately searching his expression for a sign, any hint that this was some kind of elaborate, terrible joke, that it was all a dreadful mistake. "Mr. Fisher, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice a low murmur, his gaze fixed on the polished floor. "Leo asked me to give this to you when you arrived." My grip tightened on the handle of my suitcase, the floor suddenly feeling unstable beneath my feet. I'd lived in this building for 30 years. I had raised my grandson in this very home, taking him in when he was just 7 years old. And now, I was being dismissed like a complete stranger. Did he say anything else? My own voice sounded hollow and distant, as if it were coming from someone else. Miguel reluctantly shook his head, his discomfort palpable in the quiet lobby. "He just left this note yesterday morning. He said you would understand, but I didn't understand at all. Just 2 weeks ago, before I left for my annual business conference in Detroit, everything had been perfectly normal. Leo had even sat on my bed while I packed, just like he used to when he was a little boy, cheerfully debating which ties I should bring. "Is he upstairs right now?" I asked, a knot tightening in my throat. "No, sir. I haven't seen him at all today." I managed a slight nod, fighting to keep my composure. I was 67 years old. I had weathered more than my share of storms in life. My wife's passing far too soon, the horrific car accident that took my son and left little Leo fatherless, building a business from the ground up, all while raising a child consumed by grief. But this blindsided me in a way nothing else ever had. "I'll just head on up then," I said, instinctively reaching into my pocket for my keys. Miguel shifted his weight, a pained look on his face. "Mr. Fisher, I think the locks have been changed. The lobby, usually a place of quiet transition, suddenly felt blindingly bright, and I felt terribly exposed. Out of the corner of my eye, I could sense the curious gazes of other residents near the mailboxes, watching this private drama unfold. Mr. Arthur Fisher, always so composed, so put together, now standing frozen in the entryway, locked out of his own life. "I see," was all I could manage to say. A flood of memories washed over me, sharp and painful. Leo at 8 years old, still tormented by nightmares about the crash, climbing into my bed for comfort. Leo at 12, beaming with pride after winning the middle school science fair with a project I'd helped him build. Leo at 16, rolling his eyes at my outdated advice, but still coming to me for it late at night. Leo at 22, moving back home after graduating from college because, as he'd said, "It just makes sense financially, Gramps." When had everything soured? When did the sweet boy I raised transform into someone capable of writing those cold, final words? "You are no longer part of the family. Is there anyone I can call for you?" Miguel asked gently, his concern breaking through his professional demeanor. I shook my head. Who was there to call? My friends were mostly business acquaintances. My brother lived on the West Coast, and the only real family I had in the world was Leo. "I'll find a hotel room," I said, forcing my shoulders back. "Could you please call me a cab, Miguel?" As I waited on the curb, the city air feeling unusually cold, I scrolled through my phone, rereading my recent text messages with Leo. There were no signs of trouble, no warnings. His last message, sent just 4 days ago, read, "Asterisk. Have a great final day at the conference, Gramps. Safe travels home." Asterisk. The taxi arrived, and I slid into the back seat, giving the driver the name of a hotel a few blocks away. As the car pulled away from the curb, I looked up at the 12th floor, my floor. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw a silhouette in the window. Was it Leo, or was it his girlfriend, Chloe, a woman I'd never fully trusted? The hotel room was sterile and impersonal, but at least it was clean. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my travel suit, and tried calling Leo. It went straight to voicemail. I sent a text. "Asterisk, I'm back in town. I got your note. We need to talk, please." Asterisk. Hours passed with no response. Finally, close to midnight, my phone buzzed. A new text from Leo. Asterisk. "There's nothing to discuss. The locks are changed. Your things are being packed. You can arrange to pick them up next week. Asterisk. My things being packed. As if 3 decades of a life could be neatly folded and crammed into boxes, so easily dismissed. I called him again immediately. To my shock, he answered. "Leo, what is going on? Why are you doing this?" His voice was cold, devoid of any warmth, utterly unlike him. "You know why, Gramps. Or should I even call you that anymore? You're not really my grandfather, are you? Just my father's stepfather. We're not even related by blood." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. It was true. I had married his grandmother when his father was already 10, but I had raised my stepson as if he were my own flesh and blood. And when tragedy took him, I had done the same for Leo. Blood doesn't make a family, Leo. Love does, care does, 30 years of raising you does. "Save it," he cut in sharply. "I know the truth now, about everything. Chloe helped me see it all clearly." "Chloe? Of course. What truth, Leo? Please, just talk to me." "Check the front desk tomorrow. I'll leave a box with some of your essentials." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. Sleep was an impossibility. Around 3 in the morning, I went down to the hotel's deserted lobby and asked the night clerk for a pen and some paper. I began to write, documenting everything I could remember from the last few months, desperately searching for a clue, a trigger, any sign of what could have led to this. By the time the sun began to rise over the city, I had filled several pages but was no closer to an answer. The only new consistent element in our lives was Chloe, who had appeared on the scene 6 months ago. Chloe, who was always so intensely curious about my business, my investments, and my property. I returned to my building at 9 in the morning, hoping I might find Miguel by himself. He seemed relieved to see me. "Mr. Fisher, I'm so sorry about yesterday." "It's not your fault, Miguel, but I have to ask you, did you notice anything unusual recently? Anyone coming or going from my apartment?" He hesitated for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "Movers, sir. Yesterday and the day before. Large trucks." My blood ran cold. "Movers? Taking what?" "Everything, I think. Furniture, art, boxes, everything." They had taken everything. A little later, I stood in the doorway of what was once my home, staring into the echoing emptiness where my life had been carefully arranged. The antique dining table where Leo used to spread out his homework was gone. The deep blue velvet sofa where we'd watched countless movies together had vanished. The curio cabinet, filled with mementos and treasures I'd collected over a lifetime, was gone. Miguel, taking a great personal risk, had let me in with the building's master key. "Just 15 minutes, he'd whispered, glancing nervously down the hall. "Before they come back." I moved through the barren rooms like a phantom. The walls, stripped of every photograph and painting, were scarred with pale rectangles where our memories had once hung. In the kitchen, even the heavy copper pots that had belonged to my mother were missing. My bedroom was the most painful. The mattress was still on the floor, but my dresser, vanity, and the large mahogany armoire had all been taken. And with them, generations of family jewelry, including my late wife's wedding ring and the pearl necklace I had intended to give Leo's future wife someday. I sank to the floor, my legs giving out, the sheer scale of the violation too much to process. This wasn't just a theft, it was a complete erasure of my existence. My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, you shouldn't be there. Leave now, or we'll call the police. Asterisk, Chloe. It had to be her. I ignored the threat, pushing myself to my feet and forcing my legs to carry me down the hall to Leo's old room. Unlike the rest of the apartment, his room was completely untouched, preserved exactly as he'd always kept it. His childhood stuffed animals were still arranged on the window seat. The photo collage from his college years still covered the wall above his desk. And that's when I saw it. A single manila folder lying on his perfectly made bed. Inside, I found a stack of documents I had never seen before. A deed transfer from my apartment, bearing what looked like my signature, giving ownership entirely to Leo. Bank statements showing a series of large withdrawals I had never authorized. A power of attorney document, also supposedly signed by me, giving Leo complete control over all my assets. My signature was on every single page, except it wasn't my signature. It was a close forgery, but it was wrong. "I see you found them." I spun around. Leo was standing in the doorway, and just behind him, Chloe. She was tall and striking, with a calculated sort of beauty that had always put me on edge. Her hand rested on Leo's shoulder in a way that seemed more possessive than affectionate. "What have you done?" My voice was barely a whisper. Leo stepped into the room. He seemed different, his expression harder, making him look older than his 27 years. Nothing that wasn't coming to me eventually. By forging my signature? By stealing everything I own? Chloe let out a soft laugh. Stealing is such a harsh word. We like to think of it as an accelerated inheritance. I looked at Leo, searching his face for any trace of the boy I had loved and raised. "Why? I would have given you anything you ever needed. I was already planning to leave everything to you in my will." For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. Was it doubt? Regret? But then Chloe squeezed his shoulder, and the expression vanished. "We didn't want to wait," he said, his voice flat. "You've lived your life. Now it's our turn." "Your turn?" I repeated, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "And what about me? Where am I supposed to go?" Chloe shrugged. "You're a resourceful man. You've always been good at landing on your feet." The casual cruelty of her words was stunning. "Leo," I said, looking past her, focusing only on him. "Think about what you're doing. This isn't who you are. You don't know me." He snapped back. "You never did. You were always too buried in your precious business, always trying to prove something to people who didn't give a damn about you." He gestured around the empty apartment. "All this stuff you spent your life collecting. What was it all for? Just to show everyone how successful you were. The accusation stung, partly because I feared there was a tiny grain of truth to it. After my wife passed away, I had thrown myself into my work, building my consulting business until it thrived. Had I neglected Leo? Had I been too focused on providing for him financially instead of being there for him emotionally? But no. This twisted version of our past didn't align with the reality. I remembered the school plays. I rescheduled board meetings to attend, the summer vacations we took together, the countless late-night talks we had about his hopes and fears. I made my share of mistakes, I admitted, but nothing that could ever justify this. Chloe glanced impatiently at her watch. We don't have time for this melodrama. The movers are coming back in an hour, for the last of it. I stood up straighter, drawing on a core of strength I didn't realize I still had. I'm calling the police. Chloe smiled, a cold, thin expression that never reached her eyes. With what proof? Your signature is on all the documents. The apartment is legally Leo's now. As for the furniture, he can claim it was always his, or that you gifted it to him. It's your word against ours, Leo added, his voice hardening. And who do you think they'll believe? A confused old man, or the grandson who's been taking care of him? Taking care of me? The sheer absurdity of the claim would have been laughable if the situation weren't so utterly devastating. You need to leave, Chloe said, taking a step toward me, her posture menacing. I looked at Leo one last time. Is this really what you want? He refused to meet my gaze. Just go, Gramps. I gathered the folder of forged documents, clutching it to my chest like a shield. I'll go, but this isn't over. As I walked past them to leave, Chloe grabbed my arm, her fingers digging painfully into my flesh. Leave the folder. No. I met her cold stare without flinching. You've taken my home, my possessions, even my grandson. But you will not take this. This I keep. For a tense moment, I thought she might try to physically wrestle it from me. But Leo put a hand on her arm. Let him go, Chloe. It doesn't matter now. Riding down in the elevator, I leaned against the cool metal wall, suddenly aware of how furiously my heart was pounding. The full reality of my situation crashed over me in sickening waves. I was homeless. Nearly everything I owned was gone, and the child I had devoted my life to raising had betrayed me in the most profound way imaginable. Miguel was waiting for me in the lobby, his face etched with anxiety. Mr. Fisher, are you all right? I wasn't all right. I felt as though I might never be all right again, but I somehow managed to nod. Where will you go? He asked. It was the question I had been desperately avoiding. My bank accounts were likely compromised. If they had gone this far, they wouldn't have stopped there. My closest business contacts were all out of town. Friends? I had let most of those relationships wither over the years, always prioritizing my work and Leo. I don't know, I admitted, the words tasting like failure. Miguel hesitated, then said, My brother, Carlos. He has a small apartment he rents out. It's nothing fancy, not what you're used to, sir, but it's clean and in a safe neighborhood. I stared at him. This man who had watched me come and go for 15 years, who knew me only through polite nods, Christmas tips, and brief conversations about the weather. Yet here he was, offering me a lifeline when the person closest to me in the world had cast me out. Thank you, Miguel, I said, my voice finally breaking. I would appreciate that more than you know. As I followed him outside so he could call his brother, I felt something shift deep inside me. The paralyzing numbness of shock was beginning to recede, replaced by something else. It wasn't just grief or a sense of betrayal, but a slow, burning resolve. They thought they had taken everything from me, but they were wrong. I still had my mind, my determination, and now, a completely unexpected ally. They had underestimated me. It would be the last mistake they made. Miguel's brother's apartment was on the third floor of a modest walk-up building in a part of the city I'd rarely ever visited. The space was tiny. A kitchenette, a small living area, a bathroom, and a bedroom, all crammed into what couldn't have been more than 600 square feet. The furniture was a collection of mismatched, second-hand pieces, and the carpet was worn thin near the doorway, but it was spotless. And for right now, it was everything I had in the world. "It's just temporary," Carlos, Miguel's brother, assured me as he handed me the keys. "Until you get things figure things out." He said it so simply, as if what had happened to me was a minor logistical problem, like a difficult client or a business deal gone awry. This was my life, shattered into a million unrecognizable pieces. "Thank you," I said, managing a weak smile. "I truly appreciate your kindness." After he left, I sat on the edge of the sagging twin bed and finally let myself completely fall apart. The sobs were deep and primal, erupting from a place of pain I didn't know existed, and hot tears burned tracks down my face. I cried until my throat was raw, and my eyes were swollen shut, until there was nothing left inside me but a hollow, profound exhaustion. For 3 days, I barely moved from that bed. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't eat. I just stared at a water stain on the ceiling, replaying every moment I could remember with Leo, desperately searching for the signs I must have missed, the warnings I had clearly ignored. Had he always been capable of such a monstrous betrayal? Had Chloe simply brought out his true nature, or had she somehow twisted him into this unrecognizable stranger? The Leo I knew, or thought I knew, had been a kind and ambitious young man, a little self-centered at times, like many people his age, but never cruel, and certainly never this calculating. On the 4th day, a firm knock on the door startled me from my stupor. I thought about ignoring it, but the knocking persisted, growing more insistent. "Arthur? It's Frank Miller from 10B. Miguel told me where I could find you." Frank Miller, my neighbor from 2 floors down. We weren't close friends, but we had shared countless elevator rides and exchanged pleasantries for years. I'd helped him with his groceries once when his back was acting up. He'd watered my plants for me while I was on vacation. I opened the door, suddenly feeling deeply self-conscious of my unwashed hair and the wrinkled clothes I'd been living in. "Oh, my friend." His face, usually set in a gruff but friendly expression, softened with genuine concern. "Look at the state of you." Before I could say a word, he bustled past me into the apartment, his arms laden with grocery bags. "You need to eat," he declared, making a beeline for the tiny kitchenette. "And you need a shower. No offense, Arthur, but you look like hell." His blunt, no-nonsense manner was strangely comforting. There was no pity in his voice, only practical concern. "I'm fine," I lied automatically. Frank snorted as he started pulling items from the bags. "You're as far from fine as anyone I've ever seen, and I've been on this earth for 72 years. He handed me a bottle of water. "Drink this, then go shower. I'm making some soup." Too worn out to argue, I did as he said. The hot water felt restorative, helping to clear some of the fog from my head. By the time I emerged, dressed in a clean change of clothes from my suitcase, the small apartment was filled with the comforting aroma of chicken soup and fresh bread. "Sit," Frank commanded, ladling soup into a chipped bowl. "Eat." I did, and was surprised to discover I was starving. We ate in a comfortable silence until my bowl was empty. Frank refilled it without asking. "Miguel told me what happened," he said at last. "Some of it anyway." I stared down into my soup. "My grandson stole everything from me. My home, my life's possessions, my dignity. Saying the words out loud made the nightmare feel even more real. Frank nodded slowly. My daughter did something similar to me about 5 years ago. My head snapped up. What? Not quite as dramatic as your situation, he clarified. But she convinced me I was getting too old to be safe living alone. Said I should sign my condo over to her for estate planning purposes. Next thing I knew, she'd moved me into an assisted living facility that was little more than a glorified warehouse for old folks. Took my car, my wife's jewelry, my freedom. What did you do? I asked, leaning forward, suddenly desperate to hear his answer. I fought back, he said simply. I found a lawyer who specializes in elder abuse. I got my condo back. Haven't spoken a word to my daughter since. Elder abuse, I repeated, the phrase tasting bitter. Is that what this is? What else would you call it? Frank asked, his tone gentle but firm. I'd never thought of myself as an elder, despite my 67 years. In my own mind, I was still the man who had built a successful business from nothing, who had raised a child while juggling clients and impossible deadlines. I was the person others relied on, not someone who could be vulnerable to this kind of exploitation. I don't know what to do, I admitted, the confession feeling like a surrender. I don't even know where to begin. You begin by not letting them destroy you, Frank said with conviction. Because that's what they want. You know. They want you to give up, to just fade away quietly. His words struck a deep chord. Wasn't that exactly what I had been doing for the past 3 days? Hiding? Giving up? I need to check my accounts, I said suddenly, reaching for my phone. I need to see what else they've taken. That's the spirit. Frank nodded, a look of approval on his face. And while you do that, I have something else you need to see. He pulled out his tablet and opened a web browser. Look what your grandson has been up to. The screen displayed a listing on a high-end online marketplace. My breath caught in my throat. It was my mother's antique silver tea service, a family heirloom that had been passed down through 3 generations. The listing's title read, Asterisk, Vintage Sterling Silver Tea Set. Family heirloom. Asterisk. He's selling my things, I whispered, my voice trembling with a new emotion. Rage. I scrolled through more listings he had saved. My collection of rare first edition books, the Persian rug from my living room, even my designer suits. Not for long, Frank said grimly. I've been taking screenshots of everything. Evidence. For the first time since reading that devastating note, I felt something other than despair. A small but fierce spark of fury ignited in my chest. I need my laptop, I said, standing up abruptly, and my phone charger and a legal pad. I need to start making lists. Frank smiled. Now that sounds like a man with a plan. Not a plan. Not yet. I took a deep, steadying breath. But I am not going to disappear. I am not going to make this easy for them. While my phone was charging, I scrolled through my missed calls and messages. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize, creditors. Most likely, calling about accounts Leo had surely opened in my name. But one name stood out. Eleanor Vance, my attorney. I played her voicemail. Arthur, I've received some very concerning paperwork that was supposedly authorized by you. Please, give me a call as soon as you can. A wave of relief washed over me. Eleanor had noticed something was wrong. I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. I'll call her first thing in the morning, I told Frank. He nodded, gathering his things to leave. At the door, he turned back. Remember, Arthur, you're not the first person this has happened to, and you're a hell of a lot stronger than you think you are right now. After he left, I stood in the middle of the tiny apartment and surveyed my new reality. A borrowed room, a single suitcase of clothes, and a folder filled with forged documents. It wasn't much, But it was a starting point, and for now, it would have to be enough. Elder fraud is one of the most underreported crimes in the country, Eleanor Vance said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp behind her stylish glasses. Many victims feel too ashamed or embarrassed to come forward, especially when a family member is the perpetrator. We were sitting in her spacious office, the impressive Chicago skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. I had worked with Eleanor for 15 years, ever since I had first expanded my business. She handled my contracts, my taxes, and my will, the very will that had explicitly left everything to Leo. "I'm not embarrassed," I said, my voice hard. "I'm furious." Eleanor nodded, spreading the forged documents I'd brought across her large desk. "As you should be. These are sophisticated forgeries, but they won't hold up under expert analysis." She tapped the power of attorney form. "For one thing, I know for a fact that you would never sign something this significant without consulting me first. So I can get it all back? My apartment? My possessions?" Her expression grew more cautious. "It's complicated, Arthur. We can file for an emergency injunction to prevent the further sale of your assets. We'll need to involve the police to press charges for the forgery. But these cases can drag on for months, sometimes even years." "I don't have years," I said quietly. "I don't even have months. I'm living in a borrowed apartment with nothing to my name but what's in a suitcase." "I understand." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "But I want you to be realistic about this process. Even with clear evidence of fraud, the court system moves at a glacial pace." She hesitated. "And there's also the matter of your relationship with Leo to consider." "What relationship?" I asked bitterly. "He made it perfectly clear where we stand. Still, he's your grandson. Are you prepared for what this will mean? Potential criminal charges against him, a permanent and irreparable break." I stared out the window at the city below, considering her words. Despite everything, some small, foolish part of me still clung to the memory of the Leo I had raised, the little boy who had cried in my arms after a nightmare, the teenager who had patiently taught me how to use social media, the young man who had graduated from college with honors, making me swell with pride, but that Leo was gone. Or perhaps he had never really existed at all. "I need to be practical," I said finally. "I need a place to live and money to survive on. If going through the courts will take too long, what are my other options?" Eleanor thought for a moment. "There might be another way. You mentioned several valuable antiques and collectibles were in the apartment." I nodded. "Family heirlooms, mostly. Some of them are quite valuable. And you have documentation for these items. Insurance records, appraisals, photographs, proving your ownership." "Yes," I said. "It's all in my safe deposit box. They haven't gotten to that yet, as far as I know." A small smile touched her lips. "Good. Here's what we can do. Instead of launching a massive legal battle to reclaim everything at once, we build a targeted case around the specific items for which you have indisputable documentation of ownership, items that are too distinctive to be easily sold or hidden." "And then what?" "And then we negotiate," she said. "We offer to drop the potential criminal charges in exchange for a substantial settlement." I frowned. "You want me to let them get away with this?" "No," Eleanor said firmly. "I want you to get back on your feet as quickly as possible. Sometimes, Arthur, the best revenge is living well." I wasn't sure I agreed with the sentiment, but I had to admit her approach was pragmatic. We spent the next hour meticulously outlining a strategy. Eleanor would file the initial legal paperwork and make official contact with Leo, while I would focus on rebuilding my financial foundation. As I was leaving her office, my phone buzzed with a text from Frank. Need anything from the store? Heading your way. Asterisk. My throat tightened. A week ago, I wouldn't have called Frank a friend. Now, he was a lifeline. Asterisk. Just company. Asterisk. I texted back. Within the hour, we were sitting at the small kitchen table in my temporary apartment, making lists. I had managed to access my bank accounts that morning, confirming my worst fears. Most of my liquid funds had been drained, though, thankfully, they hadn't yet been able to touch my retirement accounts or business holdings. First priority has to be income, I said, thinking aloud. I need to start contacting my clients, explain that I'm dealing with some personal challenges. What exactly is your business again? Frank asked. Management consulting. I specialize in helping companies streamline their operations and improve efficiency, I said with a wry smile. Ironic, isn't it, considering the absolute chaos of my personal life right now? Could you work from here? He asked, glancing around the cramped apartment. I considered it. For consultations, yes. The rest of the work can be done remotely. I'd need a proper desk setup, though. Frank nodded decisively. My nephew works at an office supply warehouse. He can get us a discount on a desk and a chair. Us? Figure of speech, he said, waving his hand dismissively. The point is, we'll get you set up. By the end of the day, I had a concrete plan. Contact key clients, set up a temporary home office, open new bank accounts, and secure my remaining assets. They were small, manageable steps, but they felt like progress. That night, for the first time since my world had been upended, exhaustion finally won. I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, I woke to an email from Eleanor. Asterisk. Preliminary notice sent to L. Expect pushback. Stand firm. Asterisk. I had barely processed her message when my phone began to ring. It was Leo. My hand hovered over the screen. Don't answer it, Frank advised from the kitchenette where he was making coffee. He'd stayed over on the lumpy sofa, claiming it was more comfortable than his own bed. I suspected he was just keeping an eye on me. I need to hear what he has to say, I countered, and accepted the call, putting it on speaker. Gramps? Leo's voice was hesitant, almost fragile, a stark contrast to the cold dismissal in his last call. Yes, I said, keeping my own tone carefully neutral. I just got this crazy letter from your lawyer. Some nonsense about fraud and stolen property. He gave a small, nervous laugh, as if this were all just a simple misunderstanding. What's going on? The sheer audacity of his question nearly took my breath away. I think you know exactly what's going on, Leo. Is this about the apartment? Look, I know we moved a little quickly, but you always said it would be mine someday. By forging my signature? By emptying my bank accounts? By selling my family heirlooms online? My voice remained steady, but my hands began to shake. There was a pause. Then his tone hardened. Chloe says we don't need to have this conversation. Our lawyers will handle it. Is that what Chloe says? I asked, a sudden chilling clarity washing over me. And what do you say, Leo? Is this really the person you want to be? Don't try to manipulate me, he snapped. You're just angry because for once in my life, I'm putting myself first. Is that what you call this? Standing on your own 2 feet? You have stolen from me, Leo. You have broken the law. That's not independence. That's a crime. Another pause. Longer this time. We have documentation for everything, he finally said, but there was a new note of uncertainty in his voice. You have times, forged times, documentation. Do you really want to test that in a court of law? He didn't answer right away. In the background, I could hear Chloe's voice, sharp and insistent, though I couldn't make out her words. Then I heard Leo mumble, I'm handling it. "Gramps," he said back on the line, his voice now artificially pleasant. "I think we both want to avoid any unnecessary ugliness. Why don't we meet and discuss this, like reasonable people?" I met Frank's gaze from across the room. He shook his head slowly, a clear warning. "Any discussion," I said firmly, "will have to happen with our attorneys present." "Fine," Leo said after a moment's hesitation. "Have your lawyer contact ours." After he hung up, I sat staring at the phone. "He's scared," Frank observed, handing me a mug of coffee. "Maybe," I said, "or maybe he's just recalculating." Later that day, while I was setting up my new laptop on a card table that would have to serve as my temporary desk, I received a text from an unknown number. Asterisk. "This is Chloe. You're making a huge mistake. Back off now, or we'll make sure everyone knows about your so-called memory problems." Who do you think people will believe? A confused old man or his concerned grandson? Think very carefully. Asterisk. I showed the message to Frank, who had appointed himself my unofficial chief of staff, organizing receipts and helping me create a detailed catalog of everything that had been taken. "Charming woman," he remarked dryly. "You're saving that message, I assume." "Oh, absolutely," I said, immediately forwarding it to Eleanor. "Every threat she makes just makes our case stronger." For the first time, I felt a flicker of something that felt almost like hope. I may have lost my home, but I hadn't lost my mind. I hadn't lost my will to fight. And now I had a plan. The cafe was my choice. It was neutral territory, public, and located halfway between my temporary apartment and the building that had once been my home. I arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a corner table with a clear view of both entrances, and ordered a cup of tea I had no intention of drinking. Eleanor sat beside me, looking poised and professional in a charcoal suit, her documents arranged neatly in a leather portfolio. "Remember," she said quietly, "we are not here to negotiate the return of everything. We are focusing only on the items for which we have ironclad proof of ownership." I nodded, my gaze fixed on the door. A tense week had passed since Leo's phone call, a week filled with meticulous preparation. I had successfully secured my remaining assets, contacted my most important clients, and had even managed to conduct a small consulting project over a video call. The routine had been therapeutic, a vital reminder that while so much had been stolen from me, my mind and my skills remained my own. "There they are," Eleanor murmured. Leo entered first, his eyes scanning the cafe until he spotted me. He was wearing a cream-colored sweater I'd bought him for his college graduation. His hair was cut shorter than I'd ever seen it. Chloe followed a step behind him, dressed in an expensive suit that seemed at odds with her perpetually smug expression. Trailing them was a man in his 50s, carrying a briefcase. Their attorney, I presumed. As they approached our table, I studied my grandson's face, searching for some sign of emotion. Remorse, shame, even anger. But all I found was a carefully constructed blankness, a mask I had never seen him wear before. "Gramps," he said, his voice professionally cordial as they reached our table. No kiss on the cheek, no hug, no real acknowledgement of our shared history. This was just a business meeting between adversaries. "Leo," I replied, my tone equally formal. Introductions were made. Their lawyer was a man named Alan Peterson, a divorce attorney who seemed slightly out of his depth. An interesting choice, I thought. Not a specialist in fraud or a criminal defense lawyer, but someone accustomed to dividing assets between warring parties. "Let's get straight to the point," Chloe said impatiently. "We've reviewed your claims," she made the word sound ridiculous, "and we're prepared to offer a settlement." Eleanor raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I don't believe we've presented our demands yet." We're being proactive, Peterson interjected smoothly. Mr. Fisher has certain items to which he feels an emotional attachment. We're willing to return some of them as a gesture of goodwill. Asterisk. Sometimes of them, I repeated, my voice dangerously low. My own possessions. Leo shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The apartment was in the process of being transferred to me anyway. You said so yourself many times. The times process asterisk, I emphasized, meeting his gaze directly, would have involved proper legal documentation, not forged signatures. Chloe leaned forward. Asterisk. Allegedly times forged. Your memory hasn't been the sharpest lately, has it, Arthur? Eleanor placed a calming hand on my arm, then slid a document across the table. We've prepared a comprehensive list of items with undisputed proof of ownership, bank records showing the purchases, insurance documentation, certificates of authenticity, and photographs with timestamps that span decades. Peterson began to review the list, his professional demeanor faltering as his expression grew more and more concerned. He leaned over to whisper something to Leo, whose mask finally slipped, revealing a flash of genuine worry. We have also documented the online sales of several of these items, Eleanor continued, passing over a stack of printouts from the listings Frank had been tracking. The pearl necklace that belonged to Mr. Fisher's mother, the first edition Hemingway collection, the Persian rug appraised at $22,000. Chloe scoffed. Arthur gave Leo those things. Did he? Eleanor asked mildly. Then I'm sure he won't mind explaining that to the police. We've already filed a preliminary report. The word police landed like a stone in the quiet cafe, the tension at our table suddenly palpable. Leo's face went pale, and Chloe's jaw tightened. Even Peterson looked distinctly uncomfortable. This is completely unnecessary, Leo said, his voice a little higher than normal. We can resolve this as a family. The audacity of his statement was breathtaking. A family? I repeated. Is that what we are now, Leo? After what you've done? For the first time, he couldn't meet my eyes. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Then explain it to me, I said, leaning forward. Help me understand how the grandson I raised, the boy I loved with all my heart, could do this to me. Chloe cut in sharply. This is unproductive. We're here to discuss terms, not dredge up feelings. But something had cracked in Leo's carefully constructed facade. You were going to sell the apartment? He blurted out. Chloe saw the emails on your laptop from the real estate agent. I blinked, completely baffled. What emails? About downsizing, he said, selling the apartment and moving to that retirement community in Arizona. The truth began to dawn on me, slowly and sickeningly. Leo, I was researching those options for Frank's mother, as a favor to him. I have never, ever considered selling our home. Doubt flickered across his face. But Chloe said what you needed to hear. I finished quietly, to justify what you were already planning to do. Chloe's face had become a rigid mask of fury. This is ridiculous. We're leaving. She stood up abruptly. Sit down, Miss Vance, Eleanor said, her tone pleasant, but her words laced with steel. Unless you'd prefer to continue this conversation with the detective who is waiting for my call. She tapped her phone meaningfully. Slowly, reluctantly, Chloe lowered herself back into her chair. Peterson cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the specific terms of a potential agreement. First, I said, holding Leo's gaze. I want the truth. All of it. The silence between us stretched, taut as a wire. Then, almost imperceptibly, Leo nodded. It started about 6 months ago, he began, his voice halting, when Chloe and I got engaged. Chloe shifted as if to interrupt, but Peterson silenced her with a sharp look. We wanted to buy a house, but we couldn't afford the down payment, Leo continued. Chloe suggested we borrow the money from you, but I knew you'd ask questions about her finances, her business ventures that never seemed to pan out. My heart sank. So that was it. Money, the most banal of all motivations. Then she found those emails on your computer, the ones about selling properties and retirement communities. She convinced me you were planning to leave, to sell everything and start over somewhere else, and that the inheritance I thought I had would be gone. His voice quavered. She said we should just take what was coming to me anyway, before you had a chance to change your mind. I looked at Chloe, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not as some criminal mastermind, but as a petty opportunist. A grifter who had found a point of vulnerability in my grandson and had exploited it for all it was worth. And the forgeries? I asked. Leo's eyes filled with tears. Chloe knew someone. Peterson winced visibly. So, you emptied my home, I said quietly. You sold my possessions. You left me with nothing but a cruel note. The tears finally spilled over, running down his cheeks. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't think, I never thought. That's right, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You didn't think about me at all. 1 year later, I stood in my new kitchen, the morning sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked not a bustling city street, but a small, peaceful garden. The rich scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as I arranged croissants on a serving tray. Frank would be arriving any minute for our weekly breakfast. Life now had a different rhythm, slower perhaps, but steadier and far more deliberate. The legal settlement had been finalized 6 months ago. In the end, I didn't get everything back. Some of my most cherished items had been sold and were unrecoverable, and frankly, the apartment held too many painful memories for me to ever want to live there again. Instead, I accepted a significant financial compensation package and the return of my most treasured possessions. My mother's jewelry, our family photographs, my personal papers, and a few select antiques that held deep sentimental value. The rest, I let go. With the settlement money and my retirement savings, I had purchased this small house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It had 2 bedrooms, a study for my ongoing consulting work, and the garden I had always wanted but never had the time to cultivate. It wasn't extravagant, but it was entirely mine, uncompromised and secure. The doorbell rang, and I smiled as I heard Frank's familiar voice calling through the mail slot. It better be those almond croissants in there, Arthur. I opened the door to find him holding a potted geranium, his latest attempt to add a splash of color to my garden. Happy house, anniversary, he announced. 1 year in your fortress of solitude. Hardly solitary with you barging in here 3 times a week, I teased, taking the plant from him. We settled at the kitchen table, falling easily into our comfortable routine of coffee, pastries, and conversation. Frank had become more than just a neighbor or a friend. He was family now, the kind you choose for yourself rather than the kind you inherit. Any word? He asked casually, though we both knew exactly who he was talking about. I nodded. Another letter arrived yesterday. Leo had been writing to me for months. At first they were just tentative notes of apology. Later they became longer letters about his new life, his struggles, and his clumsy attempts to make amends. He had broken off his engagement to Chloe immediately after the settlement, moved to another state, started therapy, and found a steady job, small steps toward rebuilding a life for himself, separate from the ruins of the one he had destroyed. I hadn't answered any of his letters, not yet. Are you going to respond this time? Frank asked. I sipped my coffee, considering his question. I'm thinking about it. The doorbell rang again, interrupting our conversation. I wasn't expecting anyone else, and for a brief moment, a flicker of old anxiety returned. Chloe had made several threats even after the settlement, until a restraining order finally silenced her. "I'll get it," Frank said, rising before I could. I heard murmured voices in the hallway. Then Frank returned, his expression unreadable. "It's Leo," my heart stuttered. "Here? Now?" Frank nodded. "Want me to send him away?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "No, I'll see him." Leo stood hesitantly in the doorway, looking both familiar and like a complete stranger. His hair was shorter, and he was dressed more simply than I was used to seeing him. In his hands, he clutched a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Gramps," he said softly, "I'm sorry to just show up unannounced. I was going to leave this on the porch, but—" "Come in," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Frank gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "I'll be in the garden if you need me," he murmured, slipping past Leo with a watchful glare. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the silence between us heavy and thick. Leo placed the package on the table but didn't push it toward me. "Your house is beautiful," he said finally. "It suits you, thank you." I gestured to the package. "What's this?" His fingers trembled slightly as he slid it across the table. "Something I found after everything." It had fallen behind a drawer in the apartment. I unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside was a small leather-bound book. I recognized it immediately. It was my grandmother's recipe journal, filled with her handwritten notes and cooking wisdom spanning 3 generations. I had thought it was lost forever. "I remembered how much it meant to you," Leo said, watching my face intently. "How you used to read it to me when I was little, telling me stories about great-grandma Eliza." My throat tightened as I opened the journal. Pressed between 2 of its pages was a crayon drawing from decades ago, a child's rendering of 2 stick figures labeled "Me and Gramps," standing beside a lopsided cake. "You kept this," I said, surprised. "It was the first recipe we ever made together," Leo said softly. "My 7th birthday. Chocolate cake with raspberry filling." The memory surfaced with perfect clarity. Flour dusting Leo's small nose, his look of intense concentration as he carefully measured the sugar, the absolute pride in his eyes when the cake emerged from the oven. It had been just a few months after his father's death, one of the first times I had seen him genuinely smile again. I closed the journal gently. "Why are you really here, Leo?" He met my gaze directly, something he hadn't been able to do at the settlement meeting or in any of his letters. "To see you, to tell you in person how sorry I am, even though I know that doesn't fix anything." He paused. "And to ask if there's any way, someday, we might be able to find a way forward." "Forward," I repeated. "Not back." He nodded. "Not back. I know we can't ever go back." I studied his face, looking for any sign of the manipulation I had witnessed in the cafe a year ago. Instead, I found something far more complicated. There was genuine remorse, yes, but also a quiet resignation. He wasn't here expecting forgiveness. He was just hoping for acknowledgement. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened," I said finally. "About why it happened. I betrayed you," he said simply. "There's no excuse for it." "No," I agreed. "There isn't, but there are explanations. Things I've come to understand about both of us." I rose from the table and walked to the window, looking out at Frank, who was now tending to his newly planted geraniums. "After your father died," I began, "I was so focused on providing you with stability, with security, on making sure you never felt the kind of economic uncertainty that I did when I was growing up. I turned back to face him, but in doing that, I think I may have inadvertently taught you that possessions, money, and status were the things that mattered most. That's not on you, Gramps. That was my choice. My failure, perhaps. But I wonder if I could have done better. If I could have been more present for you emotionally, not just financially. Leo's eyes welled with tears. You were always there for me when it mattered. Until I wasn't, I said quietly. When you needed guidance about Chloe, about your future, he shook his head firmly. I didn't want guidance then. I just wanted what I wanted. Consequences be damned. I returned to the table, bringing the recipe journal with me. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, I said honestly. Maybe I never will be, but I'm also not interested in holding on to all this bitterness. What does that mean? He asked, his expression a mixture of hope and caution. It means I'll answer your next letter, I said, and we'll see where that leads. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It wasn't even a promise. It was just a small opening, a tiny crack in a door I had thought was permanently sealed. Leo nodded, understanding the gift for what it was. Modest, but significant. I should go, he said, rising from his chair. Thank you for seeing me. At the door, he hesitated. Your friend, Frank. He's very protective of you. Yes, I agreed. That's what real family does. After he left, Frank rejoined me in the kitchen. Well, he asked, eyeing the recipe journal on the table. Small steps, I said. He nodded approvingly. Good. Small steps are sustainable. Later that evening, long after Frank had gone home, I sat in my garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold. My new life wasn't perfect. There were parts of it that were still raw, still healing. But it was mine, rebuilt from the ground up, and stronger in some ways for having been broken. I opened my grandmother's journal to a blank page at the very back and began to write. Not recipes, but my own reflections on loss and recovery, on chosen family, and on the slow, painstaking work of reconstruction. The house behind me was smaller than my old apartment. My social circle had contracted, then expanded in new and unexpected directions. My relationship with Leo, if it ever truly healed, would be something entirely different from what it was before, more measured, more mindful. But as I sat there writing in the fading light, I realized that perhaps this new life, this reconstructed existence, wasn't a lesser version of what had been taken from me. It was simply different, more intentional, more true. And for now, that was enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.